Hello everyone, my name is Chengshuo. I would like to give the presentation of this short paper, Virtual IMU Data Augmentation by Spring Joint Model for Motion Exercise Recognition without using real data. The motion recognition system is familiar to everyone. Relying on the machine learning technique, the system can recognize different activities. Conventional variable human recognition systems depends on the real IMU dataset, which requires participants to wear sensors and produce the data. It is time costly and expensive. However, once the application scenario has been changed, the whole system needs to be redesigned and recollected the dataset. Recently, virtual sensor data has emerged to solve the problem. The IMU data can be accessed from 3D digital human motion and help to reduce the dataset cost. In the simulation environment, the virtual IMU data can be collected and used to train machine learning models. However, there are still several problems existing in collecting virtual IMU data. Though the data can be obtained from a 3D human motion, the 3D human motion length is still limited. Finding more 3D motion resources is still time costly, and so far, real data is still needed to help adapt the data demand from the virtual to the real world. Therefore, in this paper, we proposed a spring joint virtual model to augment the virtual IMU data to train a machine learning classifier, and then recognize the real IMU data. There has already been several related work using the virtual sensor data for human motion recognition. For example, the IMU tube extracted the virtual acceleration signal from the 2D video. Similarly, the video to Doppler realized the virtual radar signal from the 2D video. Also, the virtual distance sensor can be designed in the game engine to assess the hand gesture recognition system design. For time series data augmentation, the traditional method uses the generative adversarial network, the GAN model, to produce the sensitive data. Other type of work directly operates on the signal, such as scaling, rotating, and so on. While the existing method works on the real data, our proposed method focuses on augmenting the virtual sensor data directly. This is the pipeline of the proposed method. The 3D motion extracted from the 2D video and the spring joint IMU sensor modules were used to produce more virtual sensor data and train the machine learning model to recognize the real motions. We obtained the virtual IMU data in the Unity, and the position data of the cube was used to calculate the velocity and then get the acceleration. To realize the data augmentation, two main aspects are necessary: spatial augmentation and temporal augmentation. For spatial augmentation, we introduced the spring joint sensor model. Relying on the physical simulation in the Unity, the spring joint was used to connect two separate cubes, and it can generate different kinematic distributions. This is an example of using several spring joint models to get the different kinematic distributions. The sensor models were connected to the right upper leg. As you can see that the different sensor models can generate different acceleration. Two key parameters affect the spring joint sensor model performance very much. The first one is the stiffness of the spring joint. The stiffness decides how stiff the spring will be. If the stiffness is 1, the whole spring joint will be a rigid body. If the stiffness is smaller, the joint is softer. We also tested two connecting methods. One is connected vertically and the other is the 3-dimension manners. The temporal augmentation is much easier to realize. We just modified the play space to simulate the different user conducting one motion with various speeds. In addition, to enable the virtual signal can be comparable with the real signal, the sensor coordinate transformation is very important. We convert both the virtual and real sensor coordinate into a uniform one, and use the signal fusion and normalization to transform 3-dimension data into 1-dimensional, which aim to decrease the possible difference between the two domains. To evaluate the proposed method, two baseline methods were selected. The baseline 1 method is using inertial virtual dataset, without any augmentation. And baseline 2 followed the typical real-world dataset validation method, using cross-validation to test the performance. And for proposed method, we augmented the virtual dataset by designing the virtual sensor model, spring joint model, and using the real dataset to test the classifier performance. We selected 3 aerobics exercises from YouTube. Each has 20 seconds in length, and I used the deep motion to convert the 2D exercise video into the 3D motion. Total 7 people were recruited and conducted each exercise for 19 seconds. We used the accents dots to place it on the right upper leg, and the handcrafted feature-based classifier, including the support vector machine, random forest, and decision tree were used. The typical time and frequency features were extracted, and the principal component analysis was used to further decrease the features dimension, reduce the difference between the virtual and the real world. The results showed the good performance of proposed method to augment the virtual dataset and recognize the real data. So far, the experiment still involved limited motions. It is necessary to consider more motions and further evaluate different physical simulation parameters for spring joint to figure out how different parameters influence the final result. In addition, it can also concentrate on finding the domain invariant features from the virtual to the real-world data. Here is the summary. The virtual IMU data suffers from limited 3D motion, so which leads to very less virtual dataset sample. So our proposed game is to using the spring joint model to simulate different acceleration distribution and augment the virtual acceleration data. To use the different spring joint connection and playback speed adjustment and also the domain adaptation to realize the virtual data to train the classifier and recognize the real-world data. And the experiment tests on the 3 aerobics exercise picked from the YouTube, and the results showed a good performance compared with the data not augmented. Thank you very much.